the expected attendees at that summit. Now, for more on AI and the summit, let's cross live now to Stephanie Hare. She's an independent researcher and broadcaster and writer who focuses on artificial intelligence. Stephanie, I just want to start by taking a step back and just going over a term, artificial intelligence. It's been around for quite some time, but really we're getting a lot of focus, a lot of concern on it now. Why are we so worried about it? Why are governments really starting to zero in on the possible risks posed by artificial intelligence now?
So you're right that if you ask anybody working in the field of artificial intelligence to define it, you might get a very different answer depending on who you're talking to and in what kind of use case. So let's break it down. Many people would say that artificial intelligence is no more than steroids or than statistics on steroids. That is to say, you're crunching huge amounts of data. You're using massive computing power, so it's going through and looking for probabilities and patterns that human beings can't do because we're just working with our limited brains, even when we work as a group, and these machines can do things at a vast, vast scale. So a massive supercomputer would be an example. When you're using ChatGPT, that's an example of AI. When you're using Spotify or Amazon or Netflix and it recommends something that it thinks you would like, it's drawing on a data set and it's drawing on learning from you and your patterns of behavior to predict what it thinks you would like next. It doesn't always get it right, but these are all different examples of AI. Google Translate is an example of AI, right? So there's many different things that we're already using AI for. But the reason that governments got really worried, and some researchers, not all, it should be said, but some, got very worried that some of these types of technologies could start to get out of control, and that's why we're having the Safety Summit, or we're going to create a safety institute, is because we saw something called large language models really break into the popular consciousness last year. ChatGPT is run off of a large language model, so that's the one most of our viewers will probably know. But other things like Stability AI, Midjourney, Stable Diffusion, these are things that take images, billions of images across the whole internet, and make it where you can adapt them. So you can create pictures or videos, you can fake images so that people don't even know what they're looking at anymore is real, right? You can start to impersonate humans very convincingly. So it's starting to get to a point now where some researchers, and it must be said, many companies who are building this and profit from it, have raised an alarm. So back in the spring, they raised an alarm saying, we think that this technology is starting to pose risks. Not that it's happening now, but that it could pose risks later. And they said it's on the same level of risks as pandemics and nuclear war. So that got everybody's attention. That's why we're having this summit. So now you are caught up. The big question is whether or not those risks are real. Some people think that the other risks are the risks that are happening right now with AI, that the Prime Minister, to be honest, really didn't acknowledge and really skirted over. And that's things like bias and discrimination, because there's a phrase here, garbage in, garbage out. The data that you are training your AI on is on the internet, and the internet is Twitter, it's Reddit, it's pornography, right? It's what's on the internet is not reality, it's not real. But that's what we've trained these things on. And as a result, it's a very skewed version of reality that these machines are running off of. And they're being used by the British Civil Service. They're being used by London Metropolitan Police with facial recognition technology. They're being used by companies to decide whether or not to give you a loan or a mortgage, or to decide how to treat you in the NHS. So bias and discrimination, those pose risks with AI right now. The potential of machines taking over and killing humanity, etc., those are risks that are hypothetical. They might never happen, and they would definitely happen in the future. But that's the original reason we called the summit. So there's been a lot of tension about should we deal with the risks of AI today or in some future.
So, Stephanie, there seem to be a lot of unknowns present when we talk about AI or generative AI, the kind of AI that's posed by these large language models that you referred to. You know, the Prime Minister himself said he didn't want to be alarmist when talking about these risks, but he also posed the question, you know, how can we write laws for something we don't fully understand? So how do you think this summit is going to address this question next week?
Well, I'm sure that we could look across at the European Union, which we used to be a member of, because they actually already have drafted a law. It's called the EU AI Act. You can read it online. And it's going to be passed, we think, by the end of this year. And then there will be a 2-year grace period for companies in the European Union who will have to follow it. And I suspect the rest of us will start tacking in their direction. So they break down different ways of using the technology into different levels of risk. The higher the risk, the higher the level of regulation. Pretty simple, right? So they're looking at things like facial recognition technology, which again are being used across the United Kingdom, not just by the police, but by private companies. They are saying that something like that would most likely be curtailed because it's turning us into a surveillance society. Will Britain follow suit with that? To be determined. It would be about things like, you should always know if you're dealing with an AI, right? You can't be dealing with something thinking it's a human being when it's a machine. So you should have a right. So we're thinking about things like an AI digital bill of rights. That's been something that's been aired over in the United States, where I'm from. All sorts of countries are talking about it. China has already passed its own view on AI and the law. That was back in August that went into effect. So the UK isn't leading on this. We're catching up. That's the first correction that we need to make the Prime Minister. We're catching up on that. But that's great because he's right in that we all want to work together because AI, like climate change, like pandemics, he is right on that level. It's a global phenomenon. It doesn't have borders. We're going to have to work together on this to get some sort of agreement across the planet about how we want to regulate it. And that's going to be tricky because, as you know, the values that go into this, all of the data that everyone uses and how they want to use it, will differ dramatically depending on the political system and culture that it's being rolled out in. How China wants to use it is potentially very different to how France will, or the United States, or Peru.
Stephanie Hare, thank you. Thank you for taking us through that. It's really been good to get your views on this huge topic of AI. And we're, of course, going to be talking about this a lot as we move towards that UK summit next week. Stephanie Hare, an independent researcher and broadcaster who focuses on artificial intelligence.